Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into an industry that, literally holds our entire world together. It's not flashy, it's not glamorous, but without it, our cities, our homes, everything would just fall apart. We are talking about cement.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. After water, this is the thing we use the most. Almost every building, every bridge, every road you see is there because of this one simple material. But it's so much more than just some gray powder, right? It's a massive global business, a high-stakes game with its own very specific rules. So let's break down how it all really works.
Okay, right off the bat, this chart just shows you the insane scale we're talking about. China produces over half the world's cement, a mind-boggling 2.1 billion tons. But what's really fascinating to me is the gap between number 1 and number 2. That huge space tells you everything you need to know about the potential for growth as other economies keep building.
So, first things first, how do you even make this stuff? How do we get from a simple rock in the ground to the super strong powder that binds our cities together? Well, it's not just about grinding up stones. It's this incredibly energy-intensive, complex chemical journey.
It all starts with mining limestone. You mix it with clay, and then you cook it in this giant kiln at a scorching 1500 degrees Celsius. Out of that comes this new material called clinker. You cool that down, add a few other things, and grind it into the final powder. Now here's the crucial part. Pretty much every company uses this same basic recipe. The real game isn't who has a secret formula. It's all about who can manage the costs of each of these steps the best.
Right, so if everyone's using the same playbook, how do you compete? Well, it all comes down to controlling 3 major costs. This is where the real business of cement happens. This is where you win or lose.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. This is where a cement company's money goes. You've got your raw materials, like the limestone. You have the absolutely massive cost of power and fuel. I mean, you got to run those 1500-degree kilns. And then there's freight and logistics, just moving this super heavy, bulky product from point A to point B. To win in this business, you have to find a way to shrink every single one of these slices.
So how do they do it? How do they shrink those costs? One of the biggest strategies is something called captive plants. And the idea is actually pretty simple, but it's really powerful. To control the cost and supply of something you desperately need, well, you just start making it yourself. Think of it like a pizza chain owning its own tomato farm to make sure the price and quality of its sauce is always perfect.
For cement companies, this often means owning your own power plants or even your own coal mines. And the upside is huge, right? You're totally protected from any sudden price spikes in the energy market. But it's a massive gamble. Because during a slow year, that mine just becomes a fixed cost you're stuck with. And what happens if environmental rules change? Your valuable asset could turn into a dead weight overnight. Okay, now here's a fun little paradox for you. In a business where you sell a specific product, how on earth could using less of its main component actually be a winning strategy? It doesn't seem to make sense. Well, the answer is something called the clinker factor. Remember that clinker from the kiln? That's the most energy-guzzling, and therefore the most expensive part of the whole process. So by reducing how much clinker is in the final mix and blending in other materials like fly ash, companies can slash their fuel costs. And hey, as a nice little bonus, they also lower their carbon footprint. It's one of those rare, beautiful win-wins. Okay, so you've cracked the manufacturing costs. Great job, but your work is far from over. Now you've got to face the logistical challenge, which is basically a race against time. Getting this heavy, bulky product to market before it spoils is an enormous puzzle.
And that's because cement is perishable. Yeah, who knew? Once it's in the bag, you have about 90 days before it starts to lose its strength. You can't just make a huge batch and let it sit in a warehouse for a year. This creates this constant, nagging pressure on your entire distribution network.
And this is how they solve that puzzle. It's actually really clever. Instead of doing everything in one giant factory, they use a 3-stage system. The clinker, which lasts a long time, is made at a big plant right near the quarry. Then it's shipped to smaller grinding units closer to the cities where it's blended and bagged. And finally, for the most time-sensitive stuff, ready-mix concrete, they have tiny plants right inside the city itself. It's a brilliant way to get the final, perishable product as close to the customer as possible.
So now that we get how cement is made and how it gets to us, let's ask the next big question. Who is actually buying all of this stuff? The demand for these millions and millions of tons is really driven by 3 key parts of the economy.
First up, you have housing. This is everything from a single home being built on the countryside to a massive apartment tower in the city. Second, you have infrastructure.
This is all about government spending on big projects. Think roads, bridges, dams. That's a huge driver. And finally, there's industrial demand. This comes from big companies spending money to build new factories and plants. And the interesting thing is, each of these runs on a totally different economic cycle.
All right, so we know how the industry works. Let's put on our analyst hat for a minute. How do the experts, the people who watch this industry for a living, figure out which companies are actually winning this game of efficiency? Well, they have a checklist, and they focus on a few key numbers.
And this is where it all comes together. This table takes all that complicated operational stuff and boils it down into simple, comparable numbers. You can see at a glance that Company B is just running a tighter ship. It's using more of its factory capacity, it's getting a better price for its cement, and it's spending less on shipping. That all adds up to a much more profitable business. It's that simple.
This quote just nails it. It really sums up the whole industry. A single bag of cement isn't worth a whole lot of money. It's a low-value product. So the only way you can make money is by selling an unbelievable amount of it. That's the high-volume part. And by being just relentlessly, ruthlessly efficient in how you get it from your plant to the construction site.
And that brings us to our final, and maybe the most important question of all. Making cement is a major source of global CO2 emissions. We've seen how being efficient can also be more sustainable, cutting costs and carbon at the same time. But the bigger challenge is still out there. As we keep building our future, can we reinvent the very material that holds it all together to be truly sustainable? That really is the billion-ton question for our concrete world.